But I decided to bring some clarity to some comments that were made by the honorable member, which has clearly displayed his lack of knowledge for housing in this country. And not only a lack of knowledge for housing, but a lack of knowledge for programs that were started by this government and programs that were indeed terminated by the administration that the honorable member for Christchurch South leads at this stage. And it would do him well when he comes to this chamber, instead of repeating the same thing over and over and over and over every 2 minutes, a speech that I figure could have been done, member for St. Michael South, in about half an hour. He continues to repeat this thing about agriculture and housing. And he's making himself look so silly, Mr. Speaker, the member for Christchurch South. He's making himself look so silly. Because when you continue to say that we are taking lands, agricultural lands, and turning it into housing, I would like the member to take his memory back to the years 2008 to 2018. Indeed, in the constituency that I represent, and I mentioned this in this chamber, but I am not going to be as repetitive as the member for Christchurch South. But as you journey from Boarded Hall Police Station, going east, heading to St. Philip West, you have to stop in St. George South in a place called Valley Vista in Boarded Hall. And that was about some 4 to 5 acres of land, Mr. Speaker. Agricultural land. The honorable member talked about potatoes. But my dear mother and father, they're still alive, bless them, took me to Boarded Hall, Lower Graves area to be exact, to dig potatoes, sweet potatoes 1 year. And they took me another year to dig yams. And Mr. Speaker, in 2009, the Democratic Labour Party took up 4 to 5 acres of land, and they turned it into a housing estate, Mr. Speaker. Turn it into a housing estate. You know, it is silly, Mr. Speaker, if that's parliamentary or unparliamentary, sorry. For the honorable member to come to this chamber, it speaks to ignorance on stilts, Mr. Speaker. Every single week, he speaks to picking up agricultural land. The pine plantation, the oldest housing estate in this country, was built on agricultural land. I would like the honorable member to stop it. I think the Barbadian public and those in the diaspora, persons call me and ask me if the gentleman is ignorant. The honorable member for Christchurch South, Mr. Speaker.
Has to be honorable member
withdrawn, Mr. South. Speaker.
Right. Please.
It pains me to no end. I think he's probably suffering from dementia. But Mr. Speaker, let me congratulate the honorable member for Christchurch West for piloting this bill. Call it historic. But it's part of our thrust of deconstructing and reconstructing outmoded systems, legislation, policies, and bringing us in modern day, fit for purpose. And this is what this bill is. And I want to congratulate you, member for Christchurch. That's not only you, but your team at both the urban and rural, and those other public officers within the Ministry of the Public Service and those who assisted, Chief Parliamentary Council. I want to congratulate them on this piece of legislation that seeks to deconstruct and reconstruct. Now, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't be long. I just rose to bring clarity to urban renewal for the member for Christchurch Christchurch South, and for the public, and for you, Mr. Speaker. You, of all people, you know about urban renewal. You know about urban renewal. And I want to start with the notion that we are not doing anything within the urban corridor. The Honourable member spoke about a number of projects, and need to say that urban renewal is just not about housing. It's just not about housing. The Honourable member seems to think that urban renewal is about housing. But what we did at the Bridgetown bus terminal on the eastern side, the marketplace, that's all about urban renewal. That is giving the ordinary man the opportunity to play a trade within the environs of the city. And what is happening at Brandon's and Spring Garden, that's Brandon's. The market, Brandon's market and recreational facility, to construct the landscape recreational area on the Brandon's playing field. These are some of the areas that the honourable member missed in the presentation. The Constitutional River, the flooding we stop at Murphy's Pasture, that's all part of urban renewal. But Mr. Speaker, we have acquired land in the urban corridor to assist with the urban renewal. And I can list some of the areas to educate the honourable member. We just built 20 units on White Park Road at Allings Court. 20 housing units. Then we went on the other side of the road, what we call Solaris Court. The honourable member was with me in December, early December. We opened 16 housing units. So that's 36 units on White Park Road to address the housing needs in this country. And the member for the city, he can tell you that the fire in Wellington Street that displaced the 5 families who are now housed at White Park Road, Solaris Courts, and the land that we have identified in Wellington Street between the Urban Development Commission, soon to be the Rural and Urban Development Commission, so that we can now make your area the member for the city, along with your recreational facility community center, develop that entire area. You're going to have a community center. He's talking about communities. He realized what is going on in the city, what is happening in the city, coming from Wright Park Road. And I'm not even going to mention tourism in this brief discourse here. I'm just talking about creating communities, wholesome communities, community centers, housing, green spaces. You know, I believe that the member for Christchurch South lives in some other country. I believe so. We come to this chamber week after week. We come to this chamber week after week in the housing debate, and he has the audacity to get up this morning and talk about we are not creating communities in the urban corridor. I only mentioned those few, but I say to the honourable member and I say to the country, the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, together with the Urban and Rural Development Commission and Town, Country Planning and Development, toured this entire country from St. Philip up to St. Lucie. And we identified lands both in the urban corridor and in the rural corridor. Because why? And let's create the context. We have at National Housing Corporation over 18,000 applications for housing. I came here this morning at 15 minutes after 10 o'clock, speaking to a young lady who will be evicted by a landlord. And let me pause there because we are going to address landlords shortly. I'm sending the signal to landlords in this country. We will be addressing landlords shortly. So those landlords who are carrying out unscrupulous practices and trying to take advantage of the ordinary citizens in this country, charging astronomical rents and the living conditions, while I may not be able to tell you how much to charge, but the conditions, the living conditions, we can address that, and we will. But I just came from the ministry dealing with a young lady who was being given 3 days' notice to quit, a landlord. It is heartless. And I took her to the legal team, and I asked the legal team not to break any rules, but indeed to put her on to someone who can send a legal letter to that landlord to let them know that is not how we do business in this country. A young lady with 2 children. Where are this young girl and this young boy going to sleep in 3 days' time? But worse yet, we have a greater demand than we have houses for houses. A greater demand for houses than we have houses in this country. So when the Honourable Member for Christchurch South gets up every week after week and turns a 15-minute speech into a 2-hour speech saying the same thing over and over about housing, he's living in the clouds. His thinking, his whole mindset, and I'm surprised for an intelligent man, well-schooled, to make such comments that are clearly outside of the scope of what this country needs, just to be an opposition. Just to be an opposition. We were the opposition in this country. And when we made comments in this chamber, we didn't only make comments, we came with solutions. We offered the government of the day then the opportunity to endorse, analyze, and if they wanted to, act on recommendations from us as an opposition. We don't get anything edifying from the gentleman who represents Christchurch South. It's all criticism, and he said that he's here to criticize. He said that in this chamber. He is only here to criticize the government. No, he made one good point. And I give credit where credit is due. The Honourable Member said that we need to maintain in some areas the Bajan vernacular with housing. I support that. But that came from over here. Because what the Honourable Member failed to tell the chamber and tell the country, that under the former Minister of Housing, we had a competition with the architects in this country to come up with designs for housing. And they did that, respecting the Bajan vernacular. So he's not bringing any new ideas to this chamber. He's repeating what he heard over the site. So I rose really to bring clarity to these issues. It's a good point that he raised, but he didn't go on to say, well, the government, while I was over there, came up with these ideas. So I'm letting you all know in this country that the Ministry of Housing, under the leadership of the member for Christchurch West, engaged in that level of analysis, discussion with the private sector, the architect, and we came up with house designs that we will employ across the length and breadth of this country. But I want to pose a question to the Honourable Member for Christchurch South. I want him to tell the country how many houses the Democratic Labour Party, the government of the day, built in rural Barbados between the years 2008 and 2018. I want him to tell the country that. Mr. Speaker, you would know me by now. I don't speak in a vacuum, Mr. Speaker. I don't rise in this chamber every day. But when I rise in this chamber to speak, I have facts. I have facts. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the Democratic Labour Party went to Parish Land in St. Philip under a former Minister of Housing, started 108 houses that stayed 80%, not even 80% completed. Because when you went, the member for Christchurch West, when you visited and you took the pictures of those houses, they hadn't steel, yes? But Mr. Speaker, no one could occupy those houses at the time. 108 houses. I want the member for Christchurch South to tell the country the housing record that he's talking about. But we're putting up basic houses and houses that don't maintain the landscape of this country. I'm here to correct that. I'm here to correct that. Because all he's saying to me and to you and this country, that the public servants, the planners, the architects, that they're not worth their salt. He's speaking to 150 houses. And indeed, this government has diversified the housing portfolio, the housing options being offered in this country, from light gauge steel to hardwood. And the hardwood houses are pressure tested, the wood. Pressure treated, sorry. They're pressure treated. It is excellent wood. The normal plywood, they're not like the hardwood that is pressure treated. They're just heat treated. The normal pine, sorry, they're just heat treatment. I don't want to get into the technical details here. That's not the debate. The debate is about urban renewal and the bill that was passed in this chamber. But I cannot allow these things to be said day in and day out in this country. Because, you know what? When you light a match and it catches a little grass and someone throws fuel on it, it spreads. We have to correct all these frivolous and untruths that come from the mouth of the member for Christchurch South. He knows nothing about housing. Housing is not law. He knows nothing about housing. He proves to me day in and day out, and he has someone too who supports him, who sells burgers, who's good at holding facts, who's commenting on housing. He ain't even so good at holding facts either. He sells burgers and fries and these things. Stick to what you're good at. These guys are making a mess. When they comment on housing in this country, people are laughing. People are laughing. I'm not going to get into hope. I'm going to have my say in this chamber shortly on hope and on NHC and on the general policy proposals on housing. But Mr. Speaker, those 108 houses at Parish Land, the good member for Christchurch West, we came up with a plan. The acting Prime Minister, we are a team. What the Honourable member fails to recognize, that this group is a team. We may not agree every day on everything, but it's a team. And I challenged the member because I told the Honourable member, I am going to go back to the 108 houses. I'm going to spend 5 minutes to wrap up, Mr. Speaker. But I can tell you every single member in this chamber. We had 30, we have 29. And I'm going to go back when we had 30. 29 members when it was Minister of Commerce. They approached me like we approach each other in the various ministries to address matters. Minister of Sports, the same thing. I approach them, they approach me. Now, Minister of Housing, same thing, 29. But I can tell you that there was one member over here who has never yet approached me for anything in commerce, in sports, or in housing. He never even begged for a house for his constituency. Member for Christchurch South. Epheliadai. Not one. He cares nothing about the people. And he speaks to grisettes. I'm an Elton boy. You know what he forgot? Honourable member, Mr. Speaker, the Speaker had to remind him of grisettes. He called all the areas in St. Michael and he forgot where he grew up. The member for Christchurch South, he forgot where he grew up. And I spend more time in grisettes than that member. And if you go to grisettes now and ask the people in grisettes, if the elitists attend grisettes, they will tell you no. If he goes to grisettes, the elitists don't go. And I'm very serious, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Christchurch South hardly spends time in grisettes. He is elevated to the heights and the terraces. He comes to this chamber and says, I'm taking up land to give houses to poor people. And I understand why he said that. Because he ain't care about poor people. Yes, we are taking up land to give houses to poor people. He said that in this chamber. Mr. Speaker, I tell you when I get up in here, it don't be easy, you know. This member for Christchurch South, unlike you, the member for Christchurch East, he don't like poor people. The member for Christchurch South, I classify them as an elitist. And I ain't ready for him yet. I warming up for him because the time going to come where I can put on my red and my books and I'm going to be after him. Because he's an elitist, the member for Christchurch South. He cares nothing about poor people. He cares nothing about poor people, the member for Christchurch South. And I will repeat that 6 or 7 times, member for Christchurch East. We all care about poor people. When you can get up in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, and say that the Minister of Housing is taking up lands, agricultural lands, and building houses for poor people. Who the hell you want me to build them for? The elitists all the time? The elitists can take care of themselves. He's elitist. The member for Christchurch. So sorry, Mr. Speaker, you should never refer to any member as he or she in this chamber. But Mr. Speaker, I go on to mention the lands, the 108 houses. This government took those 108 houses and finished them. And we sold them to single mothers at a very low cost to single mothers. 108 single mothers got those houses that the Democratic Labour Party left in parish land. And he has the audacity to talk about houses at Pool. He will soon see what's happening to the houses at Pool. I say nothing more on that. But Mr. Speaker and members of this chamber, we have allocated urban renewal. We have acquired land at Hinesbury Road, 3 acres of land at Hinesbury Road. We have acquired lands at Kensington New Road, where we are building Jurvilla houses through the Urban Development Commission. We have acquired land at Harmony Hall. Again, Urban Development Commission. Haggett Hall, we have built 12 units, quads at Haggett Hall. Yes, we had a little issue this weekend that is resolved. Grisette's Great House, Country Road, Hinesbury Road I mentioned. Mr. Speaker, tell me if these are not Robert Street, Wharton's Gap. These are the urban corridors. And Mr. Speaker, Reese Road, he mentioned the constituency of St. Michael South. We are now getting ready to engage in the social survey. I think there are at least 9 to 10 houses in Reese Road. The member for St. Michael South, he can tell you that. Social survey to address an issue that will require relocating the residents. That's all part of the urban corridor, urban renewal. But Mr. Speaker, Need we forget Mason Hall Street? These are areas, Mr. Speaker, in the urban corridor. And the reason why we are doing this, the honourable member has not once linked housing with crime. I am going there because I'm not afraid to go there. Those in the gallery can hear this. And the Prime Minister mentions this, not this acting Prime Minister, but he mentions it to the current Prime Minister. And let the member know there's no acting Prime Minister. When you're sworn in, you're the Prime Minister. He's the Prime Minister, right? And when our substantive Prime Minister returns, he will go back to senior minister. That's how we operate. But if he's Prime Minister, you have to respect that. He's Prime Minister. He called me on Saturday, and I addressed you as what? I said, morning, Prime Minister. And we had a lovely meeting on housing, right, Prime Minister? Yeah. So I don't know where the member for Christchurch South is going. But the reality is, these are the houses, these are the areas that we have acquired land. Now let me speak about Greenfield. He forgot Greenfield. And why we are doing this? I said, as a result of the crime. I am not saying that poor housing is the cause of crime, but I'm trying to tell you that that is one of the solutions that this government recognizes that can address the issue of crime. And the Prime Minister often says, when persons have to compete to sleep, when you have to go to sleep at 8 and wake up at 12 so someone else can sleep, and get up at 3 o'clock in the morning so someone else can sleep, especially the men, where the men are going to the blocks. You can't be happy doing that. So we have to reduce the densities in the urban corridor and also in the rural corridors. There's no way we should have 12 and 10 people sleeping in a house. In a small house, a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, tell me, do the math. 10 and 12 in a 3-bedroom, do the math, tell me. Half a body? How are they going to sleep? So when the honourable member for Christchurch South comes in, he has to create a context in which we are building houses, why we are building houses, and why we have to do it at a rapid pace. And we are not throwing out through the window the Belgian vernacular in the way we built houses before. Their designs are urban and are rural and are national housing that will be utilized and are being utilized in this country to maintain the Belgian vernacular. But it's not in every case. If you want to build 10,000 houses over a 5-year period, we can do piecemeal, 6 houses here, 7 houses there. No, we have to go to modern designs. We have to build up because we don't have the land mass. And he's talking about taking up land. He wants us to build them on the sky or in the sky. Come on, pray and tell me. But Mr. Speaker, Greenfield regeneration. We have brought on a consultant to address the densities within Greenfield. That's part of urban regeneration. And we are working with the Urban Development Commission, the soon-to-be Rural and Urban Development Commission, to address this housing issue. And in Wellington Street, these are things we sat with the Urban Development Commission, and we came up with a plan, as well as the member for the city. We sat and we came up with a plan. We have a consultant. We have started the social surveys, and we have back data. Persons go in the field, conduct the social surveys, and we have the data. And we are moving forward. But if the member, when he was over here, he was paying attention, because he hardly used to attend any meetings. He hardly used to come to this chamber. And I'm afraid to tell the public he was an absent member of this team.
Hardly come now too.
I'm going to wrap up. Mr. Speaker, he didn't want it. He don't want to hear me, so he will leave. This, the Democratic Labour Party, the Barbados Labour Party, and this is my last point. I didn't plan to speak today. Prior to 2008, the Dems come into office. The Barbados Labour Party conceptualized a project called urban renewal within the areas of Allen View, Garden Land, Greenfield, and Cat's Castle. The Democratic Labour Party came to power in 2008. They received $30 million US, an IDB project to engage in urban renewal. The member needs to do his research before he comes to this chamber, you know. Over 20 million of this money went back to the IDB because his government then, the party that he leads, did nothing in these areas. And he has the audacity to come in here to tell us about urban renewal that we have started. Mr. Speaker, I tell this chamber and I tell the country, while we will not dwell in the past, we still have to understand why the Democratic Labour Party's government carries a failing grade to the public and to the people in St. Michael within the urban corridors as a result of this project, urban renewal project, where Allen View, Garden Land, Greenfield, and Cat's Castle, Allen View, St. Thomas, the government of the day, the Democratic Labour Party, failed to execute and do anything on behalf of the people of St. Michael and St. Thomas. Greenfield, I mentioned, Cat's Castle, Garden Land. So we know that the people of St. Michael don't want to hear from the member for Christchurch South about urban renewal because they have a failing grade as it relates to the people in St. Michael and St. Thomas when it relates to anything to do with urban renewal. And Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the member for Christchurch West and the team at Urban and Rural Development. And I will say to you, you've done a wonderful job in deconstructing and reconstructing outdated legislation and policy to bring it into modern day and fit for purpose legislation and policy. And the only persons to benefit are those good people of St. Michael and those within the rural corridors, because we know that Rural Development Commission address issues of housing within the rural corridors. And I know that with this merger and with this new bill, there'll be renewed focus. And I'm confident that Barbados will be a better place to live, work, and do business as a result of these type of deconstruct and reconstruct that we're engaging in as a government. And with those words, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that we suspend this honourable chamber for lunch till 2:30 today. Wait a second.
The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 2:30 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 2:30 p.m.